Kalimera, good morning. Unfortunately, my Greek is not yet as good, so I'm going to do this in English. So the topic I chose for this talk is clinical trials, a missed opportunity in Greece with a question mark. And I hope after my talk, and if we do the right things, I actually believe that clinical trials are an opportunity for Greece. And I'm going to start with this quote. It's a quote from the EU Health Commissioner, which I believe sums nicely up the different impact that clinical trials have. Starting with the patients, where he states that patients should have access to the most innovative clinical research, and that clinical research is crucial for developing new medicines, improving existing treatment, but also can have a very important effect in boosting the economy and contribute to economic growth. Now, I think you're all familiar with that pharmaceutical R&D is a very lengthy, costly, and risky process. And just to remind you that, the chances actually from getting a drug from discovery to approval are very, very slim. Of about 5,000 to 10,000 molecules that are discovered, only about one of them actually makes it into a medicines. And even drugs that get into clinical trials, only about 16% of those actually are approved at the end. And the investment in clinical trials and to develop new medicines is huge. So the average cost to develop a new drug is more than $1 billion. And the reason for that is partly due to, with the medicines that get approved, you have to finance all the one that fails. So it's a very big investment that pharmaceutical companies have to do in order to bring drugs to the market. Now, actually, if you look on R&D spending, and if you look at the biggest company, the biggest investor in R&D, what you can see at the top of the slide is, if you look at the 10 highest spender for R&D, actually 5 of them are pharmaceutical companies. And our company is a very big investor in research and development, not just globally, where we spend about 7 billion a year in research and development, but also in Greece, a country which we are present for more than 35 years. And 2013, we had more than 30 trials, which included more than 170 sites, more than 1,300 patients. We brought fast-track and innovative medicines to Greece. And also, we have a very big department in our organization of more than 50 professionals who are highly educated and very well paid. I think the pharmaceutical industry, as mentioned before by the previous speakers as well, can have a very beneficial impact on the economy overall, as the pharmaceutical industry, as I showed you, is one of the most research-intensive industry there is. And there are numbers showing actually that the average pharmaceutical company spends about 5 times what an average manufacturing company does in relation to sales. And not just is it a pure spending per se, but because the positions that the companies have are very high quality ones, that there is a multiplier effect, and every position there is in the pharmaceutical industry can lead up to 5 other positions, that support that effort. So from that point of view, I think also from a country point of view, investing in pharmaceutical R&D can be a very good strategy. Now, I think fundamental for this to work is a collaboration between the industry and government associations. And this is kind of a slide depicting that. I think historically, the focus of NHS or public academic institution has been mostly on clinical research, where the focus of the industry is more on translational research and clinical research. But the two cannot live in separation, and both of them need to go hand in hand and collaborate very closely. And I think these partnerships can really benefit both sectors and providing opportunities to advance treatments, to come to new breakthrough medicines, and also to boost economic growth. Now let me look at Greece in a bit more detail, looking at clinical trial activity and investment in general. And I would say even before the crisis, Greece spent relatively little in terms of percentage of GDP on R&D. According to these figures, it's about 0.7% in 2007 versus the European average, which is more than 1.5%, or countries like Finland or Switzerland that spend more than 3% of GDP. And I think it's clear that the crisis significantly affected, the spending even more so. And according to some publications, the government support for research have dropped by as much as 50%. I think on the other hand, the pharmaceutical industry, at least if I take our company as an example, whereas we did decrease costs in Greece as a result of the crisis, we actually did not decrease our investment in R&D. So we tried to maintain really our spending in R&D as it benefits the patient at the end. And I think most of my colleagues have done the same. Now, if we actually look how active is Greece in terms of clinical trials, this is an analysis that shows the number of trials that were submitted to EMA, European Medicines Agency, as part of marketing authorizations for new drugs. So it looks basically how many participations there were per country. And what you can see if you compare Greece with countries of similar size, such as Austria, the Czech Republics, or even Belgium, what you see that these countries, had up to twice as many or even 3 times as many clinical trial participations as part of these large international trials. Now, the question is, why is this? And actually, last year, there was a study, 2012, there was a study done by the National School of Public Health looking at some of the causes that could be. Now, I think the good news is it's not a problem of capacity, right? Because I think in Greece, the population of 11 million people provides a sufficiently large patient pool. We also have a good number of public hospitals, a good number of quality universities, and the number of physicians per capita in Greece is among the highest in Europe. So what's the problem then? So the problem is not capacity, which is good, because capacity is really, really difficult to fix and very expensive and takes a long time. So according to this study, the problem seems to be elsewise, as already also pointed out by some of my speakers. It's an issue of regulatory framework, the administrative procedures, I think the complexity of the approval process for clinical trials, and maybe to some extent as well, the lack of support from the government really to push R&D and clinical trials in this country. Now, I think it's important for you to realize, how we as companies make decisions, because these clinical trials, at least the big registration trials, which includes thousands of patients, are multinational trials. They're done on a global level, and it's done competitively. So when the company looks at where to invest in these trials, we take several factors into account. Now, to make it simple, I narrowed it down to 4. So we look at the quality, we look at cost, we look at time or speed of running these trials, and then we look at the more kind of, I call it innovation ecosystem, more at the friendliness or support for the pharmaceutical industry in general. And based on this, we will decide where to do our clinical trials and how many patients we can include. And if I do my own very personal, kind of assessment of where Greece stands on this, I think there are good news here and some not so good news maybe. In our experience, if you look at the quality that we see in Greek centers, it's truly excellent. I would say it's among the best that we see in Europe. Cost-wise, Greece is extremely competitive, and cost is a very important factor for us in running clinical trials. I think where we need improvement, and it's a bit linked to what I said before in terms of clinical trial, is the speed and complexity of approval process. I mean, speed is really crucial because these clinical trials, once they start, if you miss the start, it's very, very difficult to catch up. So therefore, to be there from the beginning is fundamentally important. And I would say, last but not least, the system for pharmaceutical innovation overall, I think, needs to improve. I think we need more political and legal certainty. I think the industry has done its part to really support, in this difficult situation, the healthcare system. But I think we're also at a point where we cannot do much more in terms of price and budget cuts. I think also I would like to see more recognition for innovation. Unfortunately, in this country, innovation is mostly equaled with costs. but nobody really thinks of the benefit that these new drugs could bring for patients. And unfortunately, we still have a large delay in approving and pricing of new drugs. Now, I think there have been good initiatives started, or at least put in place, and this is just a scheme of the new framework that has been put in place for the approval of clinical trials. Now, I think it's an excellent initiative because it aims to reduce the time for approval to 60 days, which would be extremely competitive if we compare these to other countries. It also allows for parallel submissions. It even includes penalties for the different stakeholders for not complying. I think the problem is it doesn't work yet, I hope. And I hope during these 2-day meetings, with all the key stakeholders in the same room, we will have the opportunity to discuss actually what needs to be done so we can really implement this and make this potentially a competitive advantage for Greece as a clinical trial sites. And I think I go back to the environment because, it's something we take into account a lot when we discuss about investments. And what we need transparent processes. I think a lot has improved. I've been here now for a year, and at least in the year I've been here, I think thanks to the efforts by the minister and others, I think we've seen improvement, but it's not enough. Budget needs to be sustained, otherwise we will not be able to offer the treatment that we would like to need. Payment of the outstanding debt, it has improved a lot in 2013, but it still needs to improve because only this will enable the industry to invest again in Greece. I've talked a lot about the support from the industry, and actually happy to hear the Secretary General speaking and showing her support, but this certainly needs to continue. And as I said before, I think the recognition for innovation by allowing new medicines to come to Greece is fundamentally important in order for us being able to reinvest again. Now, I want to bring this back to the patients because oftentimes we have very technical discussions about this, and at the end, it's really the patients that benefit or suffer from availability or lack of availability for clinical trials. And patients should have access to clinical trials because it can make all the difference for them, especially in situations like this where access is difficult. Clinical trials can provide true means of access to modern treatments for patients. And I just want to show you an example of one of our patients that we treated in our own trials. This is a patient with skin cancer that was treated and relapsed after treatment of his disease. And actually, he had the opportunity to be included in a clinical trial with one of our drugs called anti-PD-L1. It's an onco-immunology approach, very hot topic. And actually, this patient was lucky because as you can see in his progress, from a very severe form of skin cancer, actually, through the integration of this trial, he's now doing fairly well. Right? So if that patient wouldn't have had the opportunity to participate in a clinical trial, who knows what would have happened to him. And I believe that the Greek patient should have the same opportunity to participate in these kind of trials as patients in the US or elsewhere. So I think just to sum it up, I believe if we do the right thing, clinical trial investment in Greece can be a case of opportunities. I think what needs to be done, there are lots of strengths that I think we have here. We have good capacity, we have excellent quality, we have a very competitive cost base that could really benefit from inflow from R&D and capital associated with clinical trials. But I think we need to work really hard and work on our weaknesses. I think the processes need to be faster, they need to be predictable, they need to be less bureaucratic. I think we would like to see even more favorable environment for the industry overall. And I think we need patients to innovative medicines because, just having clinical trials, but then if these drugs are not available later on in the Greek market, it puts us at a very difficult situation, both the patients and all of us. And I think at the end, I think we made a lot of progress in terms of the collaboration between our stakeholders, but as the the process of clinical research is so interlinked, I think this good collaboration needs to continue and needs to be strengthened. I thank you for your attention.